So you want to play Bacchus, but the only problem is you don't know how. Well, fret not, because I'm going to teach you how to build, play, and level Bacchus all in this video, so let's go ahead and get into it. Let's start this off with Bacchus's passive Drunk-O-Meter. Basically, the more drunk you are, the better. So you use your 1, and that fills up your meter on the left-hand side of your screen, and basically, the more drunk you are, the better. You get damage mitigation and some magical power on top of that, depending on how hammered you are. Also, if Bacchus does get a kill, it increases his Drunko-meter by 15%. But let's go ahead and move on to the rest of his kit. Let's talk about Bacchus's 1 chug. So basically, you take a drink, it fills up your Drunko-meter, which is your passive, and it gives you protections and magical power. That's about it. You want to constantly be using this ability all the time, but let's go ahead and move on to his 2. Bacchus's 2 is a leap attack where he belly flops onto enemies, knocking them up and slowing them up to 20% for 2 seconds only if your Drunko-meter is high enough, which is 30%. So that's another reason why you should be constantly using your 1 for your Drunko-meter, but let's go ahead and move on to his 3. Bacchus's 3 is a cone attack that does tick damage to his enemies. It stuns for 1.5 seconds, and on top of all of that, it reduces healing by 50% for 5 whole seconds, which is a ton of stuff for 1 ability. Now, the only downside to this ability is the 3 only stuns on the last part of the ability. So if you whiff the last part and the enemy gets away from you, well, you don't get the stun, and the stun only happens if your Drunko-meter is past a certain point, so constantly be popping your 1. I don't know how many times I've said that this video, but I said it a lot, so obviously it's an essential part of your kit. So let's go ahead and move on. Bacchus's ultimate is this big AoE that intoxicates his enemies for 6 seconds, and they kind of just run around like that, like the Odins are right now, and it gives you a power buff, so you'll be doing even more damage after you use your ultimate, so make sure to just spam all your abilities after your ultimate as well. And let's go ahead and move on to leveling. When leveling Bacchus, I like to get his 2 and his 3, and then of course you get your ultimate whenever you can, but the first ability I like to max is his 2. You don't even have to put a point into his 1, because he can automatically use it. So at level 1, you could use up to 2 abilities if you don't put a point into your 1, of course. But next thing I like to max out is his 3. Of course, you'll be putting points into your ultimate until you're like level 14 or 15, and then you'll start putting points into your 1, and of course leveling your ultimate when you can. But let's go ahead and move on to building. Before we get into the build portion of the video, if you guys like this type of content, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and let's go ahead and get into it. Starting with starter items, I like getting Sentinel's Gift. Going into Benevolence, into Compassion works pretty well on Bacchus, and it's pretty fun to do. You could get Tainted Steel for anti-heal, but if you're going Sentinel's Gift, I like going Sentinel's Embrace. I like getting Gauntlet of Thebes. To be completely honest with you, Gauntlet of Thebes is one of my favorite tank items because it's so good. It gives you 250 health and a 15 HP 5, and on top of all of that, when you stack it, it gives you 50 physical and magical protections. It also gives you the aura effect that increases your magical and physical protections for your allies for just being around you. So Gauntlet of Thebes is just super good. Next item I like to get is Emperor's Armor, which increases your towers and phoenixes attack speed by 50%, and it lowers the enemy's towers and phoenixes by 30%, their attack speed. It is really good for diving enemy teams, phoenixes, and towers, and it's really good for defending because your phoenix will just turn into a machine gun and eviscerate the enemy team, which is awesome. Next item I like to get is Manticore Spike that gives you 35 physical and magical protections. It gives you 300 health and 20 MP5. And on top of all of that, it has a really good passive. Anytime you hit an enemy god with crowd controls, so your 2, 3, and 4 on Bacchus, so a lot of your kit, most of your abilities, they drop a spike on the ground that gives your allies or you bonus damage on your next ability, which is just awesome and really good. Next item I like to get is Mail of Renewal, giving you 250 health, 15 HP 5, and 30 physical and magical protections. It also has a awesome passive as well. It gives you stacks of protections every time you're hit by an enemy, stacking up to 5 times, giving you 20 physical and magical protections at 5 stacks. And then once you hit the 5th stack, you're immediately healed for 15% of your maximum HP, and then it also heals allies for 15% of their maximum HP, but over the next 10 seconds. So it's really good. Next item I like to get is Prodwin, giving you 30 physical and magical protections. On top of that, giving you a 20% cooldown reduction. The passive is really good, giving you a shield based off your protections that lasts for 5 seconds. And if it's destroyed or times out after the 5 seconds, it will explode, dealing damage to your enemies. It's a nice item to have. Other good items that work well on Bacchus is Winged Blade. If you keep on getting hit by slows, you can't really get into the enemy team and stick to them. This item is awesome because when you're hit with a slow, you immune the slow and your movement speed is increased by 20% for 4 seconds. It can only occur every 30 seconds, but it's a nice thing to have. Stone of Binding works incredibly well on Bacchus because the passive activates when you hit an enemy god with a crowd control, which will place a debuff on them, reducing their magical protections and their physical protections by 10 for 5 seconds, which is your 2, 3, and 4. It works really well, and it's just a nice item to have on Bacchus. It helps your team, or if you're going damage Bacchus, this works too. Jade Emperor's Crown, of course, reduces your physical power of the enemies around you by 15%, which is awesome because the enemies just get their power reduced by 15%. It's a nice item. You could also get Pythagoras Peace, which gives your allies magical lifesteal. It's just a nice item to have, Pythagoras Peace. I forgot to put in Pestilence, but Pestilence, anti-heal, I think that's a no-brainer. But if you guys like this type of content, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys later.